Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Think Your Way to an Epic Life. And my next guest is absolutely a fascinating man. I would actually call him a Renaissance man, and his name is Ari Block. And Ari is an author. He has a daughter who, at the age of 11, has written two books, and the goal is to have those books published this year in 2025. He has a son whose goal is to take the bar exam at the age of 16 to break the world record for the youngest person to ever take it. He was in the military as an intelligence agent. He has done all kinds of business to business. He sold his first business when he was 15 years old. He sold his second business at 26, I believe. I'm pretty sure you'll catch me if I mess that up. And for millions of dollars at 26 years old. And he's just so down to earth and so real and so fun and so genuine. I know you're going to learn a ton from this. I hope you enjoy as much as I did.
Be honest. Have you been telling yourself things will calm down soon for way too long?
We see it all the time. Burnout doesn't always have to look like you're falling apart. Sometimes it just feels like you lost your spark, but you're still pretending everything's fine.
So, we're inviting you to our next free Zoom masterclass on July 16th. Avoiding burnout isn't enough. Here's how to reignite.
This one's all about helping you reconnect with what actually fuels you. No, not caffeine or pressure, but something deeper, something lasting.
You'll learn how to stop pushing and start realigning. And no, we're not saying you need to quit your job or move to the mountains. Unless you want to, I know a really good realtor.
You just need to remember who you are beneath the busyness and how to tap in that part of you that loves life again.
Sounds like a great deal. So, if you've been grinding through your days and secretly wondering, is this all there is? We've got you.
Just click on the link in the show notes or scan the QR code. It's free, it's live, and yes, there will be laughter, possibly at my expense.
I try not to, but absolutely. Also, some breakthroughs too.
We'll see you there.
Ari, thank you so much for joining us on Think Your Way to an Epic Life.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being on your show.
I'm looking forward to interviewing you. Guys, this is going to be fascinating. So, Ari, your son is preparing to take the bar at
Yeah.
age
Well,
16.
that's the goal. The earliest age that anybody has taken the bar, like the world record, is age 17. So I told him, if you do it before, so now it can be 16 and 12 months and 5 days, right? So it can technically be 17 and 5 days, but it has to be less than 17 and 7 days because that's when the world record is. And I say, if you do this, I buy you a brand new car.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how hard is he working?
He's studying 2 hours every day. So I had a lawyer on my show, and I was like, hey, can I ask you a favor? Can you talk to my son? So he verified, like, is he studying enough hours every day? Is he using the right books? Is he doing all the right things? And so far so good. She gave him a lot. We were doing mistakes, like we weren't getting the right stuff. We had the wrong books, and anyway, so we got it fixed. And he's studying 2 hours every day. And I don't have to say to him anything. The beauty of intrinsic motivation is just something incredible. But yeah, he just does it, and it's amazing.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so that's one. And then you have a daughter who's 11 and she has written two books.
So I was messing it up, and I forced her to read Thinking Fast and Slow, and she was studying this every day for a couple hours. She hated it. She said things that I should not repeat on the show, but the gist of it is, like, I'm making her life a living hell. Um, and I kind of was really doing a bad job as it came to intrinsic motivation. So I got some advice from one of my guests on the show, and she said to me, look, Ari, you need to figure this out, and you need to figure out what she loves. And so I was like, okay, let's try that. So I asked her, like, what are you doing at school? Da, da, da. And she told me she was writing a book of poetry for school, for like the advanced. So I was like, okay, let's one up that. And she's been asking for a cat for years. And I'm like, over my dead body. And again, I'm toning it down for the show. That's not what I said. It was bleep no, was what I said to her. It's very debatable if I'm a good parent or not. We can talk about that too. And then she tells me this, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I didn't know this. Again, feeling like a bad parent now since I know nothing. And then I'm like, hey, let me one up you. If you can get this book of poems, book of poetry, published by an actual tier 2 publisher, tier 1 is almost impossible nowadays. And tier 3 is a lot of kind of, you pay somebody to do it, but a tier 2 publisher, meaning that somebody will actually buy your book. I will get you a cat. So again, intrinsic motivation. She is working 2 hours a day. She is writing poems. She's reading books about how to write poems. She's doing her podcast now where she interviews people. And I say nothing. She just does it. As before, I had to shout at her, have you done your thinking fast and slow? And I would test her, and there was crying involved on her side and sometimes on mine. And now she just does it. And now she just does it. And she's excited about it. And she comes and she shows me her new poems. She's getting really good. So I don't know, there's something that I completely messed up when it comes to intrinsic motivation, which has just lit my kids on fire.
Wow. 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 So how does your wife feel about all this?
So we have, I think, a separation of duties. Obviously, she loves it, but we have a separation of duties. I think about the long term. She thinks about the short to medium term. So we kind of separate duties in the family. Sometimes it is hard for other people, not only my wife, to see the value of things that are really strategic thinking into the future. So sometimes there are disagreements. And sometimes I forget that the short term is also very important. It's not only about what will happen when they're 20 and 30 and we're dead, and not when they're 30, but when they're 40 and we're dead, and they will they be fine? Because that's what concerns me. So we have a good balance between short term on her side, long term on my side. Together it works well.
Wow. I can't imagine you've got a family full of visionaries, what the dinner table must look like. Like what kind of conversations, like, what do you guys, oh my gosh, crazy stuff. What do you talk about?
Oh, it's mostly what you would expect a bunch of 5-year-olds to talk about, and very basic dad joke humor. It's like the opposite of intelligent. It's really bad. So no, I mean, there's nothing I think impressive about our dinner table talk. Um, yeah, so I don't know, there's that duality of you try to do impressive stuff, but then you laugh at stupid whatever really bad jokes. So it's a mix of things, right?
So do you feel like adults seriously underestimate what children are capable of?
I could not agree with that more. So when I saw my first kid, before my first kid, I was like, nah, what's a 6-year-old, 7-year-old? This is a baby. They don't understand anything about anything, right? My 3-year-old, my first 3-year-old, blew me away. I'm like, oh my God, this is a human being, incredibly intelligent. He is negotiating with me. Like, this is a 3-year-old. What's happening here? And I was just blown away. So what I thought I knew was completely wrong. Just wasn't so. And I've completely changed my opinions after raising children. The other thing I would say is that it's a lot of what you put into them. So if you believe, it's like if you tell me it is, it's true. Tell me it isn't, it's still true. So whatever you believe about your children, that's what's going to be true. And if you believe they can't, they can't. If you believe they can, well, they might. So I think that's the other half of it. It's not just kids being incredibly amazing. I think it's also what you believe. Are they amazing or not? And I haven't stopped believing. And the more you believe, the more they show they can. So it's been this like, what's the limits? I'm not sure. So yeah, wow, just on this topic, we could talk for an hour. So I appreciate the question.
Absolutely. Like I'm sure you're aware of the study where teachers were told these certain kids are geniuses
Yes,
and
yes,
really
yes.
weren't. And
It
at
was
the end,
bullshit. It was random. Yes.
They were geniuses
Yeah.
because, and the thing
Yeah.
about kids, especially through the age of 6, is they're in theta state. Everything you say to them is gospel. They believe it 100%. And so it's so important to all of you parents out there that my heart is, I'm begging you to tell them that they can, to tell them that they are amazing. There's a 1 in 400 trillion shot that you were born. You are
Yeah.
special, right?
Yeah.
Every single person is special.
That's all right. And then, beyond that, if you think about it, and let's not get political or religious, but as we are the best of whatever 3, 4, 5,000 years of getting better, right? So you know so if you think about it, like, you are the most beautiful, smart, intelligent person that has ever lived, right? This generation right now, so we're always getting better. And just appreciating that moment, right? So whatever in the dark ages, right? Why are the doors so low in the dark ages? Because everybody's growth was stunted. Simple, right?
Mhm.
Now we are the most beautiful and smart than we ever have been. So next time you look in the mirror and ask yourself, am I fat? Maybe just recall that you are the most beautiful specimen that has ever lived, that has ever existed, and give yourself a break.
Oh, that's beautiful. So your parents must be something because you started your first business at the age of 8.
Mm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, they're definitely something. I'm not sure what, but I won't give them too much agony on my pain, because my mother follows everything I do religiously. But yeah, so before the age of 8, let's go back to, let's say, 5, 6, 7. Um, my dad would wake us up 3 o'clock in the morning because his printer or fax or internet site didn't work. So before I started the business, I was basically IT support for my dad, right? And this is the day back where, there was no internet. It was like modems, right? We had internet providers, and we had we didn't even have phones back there. So, we basically did all the IT. And if he couldn't print one of his, he did like FDA books, Federal Drug Administration book for dummies. So basically distilled FDA data, turned it into easy how-to manuals. So if he couldn't print, if his printer didn't work, we would wake up 3 o'clock in the morning and help him. So we got, I would say, beaten with this like entrepreneurial mindset from a very, very early age. And it's kind of like an infectious disease. If your father's an entrepreneur, you get it. It's hard. I don't know if it's possible to get rid of this disease. It keeps coming back. So that's where it started, absolutely, for my dad. It doesn't always look pretty. I've got to tell you that. It's not a pretty story. Probably waking up 3 o'clock in the morning is probably the easiest of it. It can be rough to be an entrepreneur. And when you're surrounded with that, then you're like, well, obviously at that age, and any age until you're like 40, I don't know, 40 something, I don't know, you still think you're smarter than your parents, right? You don't
Oh, yeah.
acknowledge their. So I was like, oh, if he can do this, he's a dum-dum. I can do this, right? As I said, it takes a while for you to kind of appreciate how much your parents learned in, what was it, Huckleberry Finn? How much your parents learned in 20 years? I think it was Huckleberry Finn. I think that's right. And then, so you go and you try. And I was like, oh, I can fix computers, because I'm standing behind my brother, seeing him fix and build computers. So I'm like, oh, I can sell this as a service. So at the age, I think it was like eight something, I put up a note all over our little community, which I printed out and like cut it so you can put off a piece of paper.
Aw.
And I felt so bad because I was charging people probably the equivalent of today's money, like $200 an hour. And I felt so bad because I'd come over for 15, 20, 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, mostly not. And then they'll pay me $200, an 8-year-old. And nobody was like, oh, who the hell are you? You're only 8. Like, what? No, I got their computer fixed and they paid me and I walked away. And I was in shock. Like, how is this even possible that I can make $200 in 15 minutes and people are okay with this? complete utter shock. In fact, I felt bad about taking the money if I fixed it quickly and easily.
Wow. What gave you the nerve to charge that much at that age?
I wish I remembered.
Ah,
I don't know the answer to that, but I think it was my brother, my middle brother. I'm the smallest, so I think it was him. It was like, oh, like if you go to this computer store, that's what they're going to charge. You're coming to their house, right? They don't have to go there. If you get it done, you charge them what they would charge. So he was like, just charge the same. So I was like, huh, okay. And I just did what my brother told me. I think that's what happened. But it wasn't my idea and I didn't feel good with it. And I just got away with it. And I was like, okay, I guess it's okay.
wow. It's better than okay. I hope this encourages, I hope that some of you will share this with your 5 and 10-year-old kids so that they can see there's really no limit. And especially when you're at home under mom and dad's roof and you don't have any bills to pay, this is the time to start learning it. It's beautiful.
And I'll double down. The kids today know much more than the adults. I pride myself as being a technologist. I do it for work, and yet I still find myself asking my son, like how. So I would argue that the kids today still have that technological, if not more than ever. So they can leverage that. They can definitely make value of their services and their knowledge because they're ahead of the curve, right?
That's right. That's right. Okay, I'm going to just totally change directions here, and we're going to go into your military intelligence and your digital forensics and all that side
Yeah.
of you. So, what did your military intelligence work teach you about decision making under pressure?
Yeah. So I think the biggest part about there's a lot of things I could go into, but one of the concepts that is called, I'm going to remember this in a second, OODA loop. And what an OODA loop is basically the ability to assess a situation, get information, understand where you are, and then make a decision and act, right? Observe, orient, decide, act, I think. Our audience can Google it and see if I made a mistake. And the thing is that life changes very quickly. Even in our personal lives, right? Like things change, we get new information, we think this person likes us, and suddenly they do something and they've done it 10 times, and that new information comes in and like, hold on, this person doesn't like us. Or hold on, we're gonna fail this. Or hold on, like there's a serious issue, right? My son was bullied when he was younger. And like suddenly it was in 1 second that I suddenly figured, oh, hold on, wait, something's happening here. So you have to reassess, make a decision and move. So I think that kind of philosophy that you need to always be not only collecting information, but reassessing constantly and then making new decisions and not being caught in one decision because that new information might completely change your mind. I think that has had such a fundamental impact on my life that lasted way beyond the military. And I feel that a lot of people today suffer from kind of being stuck in a decision. Even though the new information is kind of just pointing them in a new direction, they're still stuck in that bias, right? In that hindsight bias or in the expert bias or in, over 300 psychological reasons why people make bad decisions. We can talk about, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky and thinking fast and slow, but there's a lot of reasons why we make bad decisions. And I think that for the first time, that's where I was like, oh, I was taught how to thinking about making decisions, and that how you make decisions is sometimes even more important than what the decision was and was the decision successful or not, because I would argue that a bad decision could have still been right. Even though the outcome was bad, you still made the right decision. So this whole philosophy of decision making and how you think about situational awareness just completely changed my life. So that was just massive, huge, huge, huge. And every single soldier learns this about the OODA loop.
Golly. Okay. So how long were you in military intelligence? It's Israeli, right?
Yes, that's correct. So 6 years. For those in the audience who don't know, military is compulsory in Israel. It's absolutely compulsory. It would be illegal to try and evade it. So every single person is forcefully enlisted at the age of 18, whether you like it or not, whether you're a pacifist or you want to go shoot a gun, whatever side of it you're on, and you have to go into the military, and you do that for
Excuse me,
anywhere
males
between
and females, or just males?
yes, 100% males and females. Yes.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Males, females, Jews, Druze. The Druze population joins the military in large numbers and is a huge part and very important part of the team. So yes, absolutely everyone.
Fascinating. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to take just a second here to just really
Sure.
absorb that as a female. Like every time, every person that has a child, they know that eventually that child will not be theirs anymore. They're going away into the military
Yeah,
and
it's
doing.
frightening. Yeah.
Wow, that's golly, that's so fast. I would love to do studies on the Israeli population and after, what are the results compared to people who don't have to serve in any way. I would think that you're better off.
Look, I on my show, I interview a lot of veterans, right? It's part of how we give back. My show is not for money or sponsors or anything like that. It's purely for curiosity, and also giving back. So one of the populations that I focus on interviewing and supporting and is really veterans. So I've gotten a lot of discussions in, and really the interesting discussion sometimes is when you shut off the recording, because then people say things without thinking twice. I got a lot of insights into the Israeli military careers, and I can tell you that the perspective that whether it's Israeli or American, whatever it is, people get so much perspective from their service. And that perspective completely changes their life. In fact, there's a very famous research in social psychology circles about the red eye, brown eyes, and all the controversy around it. And the famous saying that comes out of that is that, perspective adds 80 IQ points. And I completely and absolutely believe this. If the audience isn't familiar with with brown eye, blue eyes, definitely go and research it. It's absolutely fascinating. In fact, it's hard to believe.
Okay, now you're talking literally eye color?
So yes, so if you want, I can go into it very shortly.
Yes,
There
please.
was a school teacher in the US who basically I think this was the day after Martin Luther King was shot. And she basically said, okay, I am going to simulate racism in the classroom. And she basically came to the students and said, okay, everybody with brown eyes is better than everybody with blue eyes. And in fact, and then she goes on, and these are young kids. I can't remember the ages exactly, but it's like, half your height, right? And she basically put them through forced racism. And then she saw how that played out throughout the whole day. And these kids were traumatized. The next day, she flipped it. She said, well, that wasn't exactly right. Now the blue eyes, so if the brown eyes were on top, then the blue eyes were on top the next day. And she's like, oh, that wasn't right. Actually, this color eye, they are the smarter. And if anybody with the other color eyes, oh, that's a stupid remark. That's because you have brown eyes, right? So she inverted the racism, and then she put one on top, one on the bottom. Now she did some analysis on IQ before, and then she did analysis on IQ, basically an IQ test. And then the results showed that there was, I think it was like an 80 IQ jump. Now that's impossible. That's impossible. And that's what the researchers to the university that she sent it in said. This is wrong. You're just a school teacher. You don't know what you're doing. That's impossible. Something's wrong with your techniques, your methods. So she insisted. They came back. They did the research themselves, and she was right. The shift in perspective that those children gained through that forced trauma. And she got into a lot of trouble because of this, because she was, to a degree, traumatizing these children. And that's a whole discussion, right, around that. Is that because the parents were up in a roar, justifiably, right? What did you do to my kid? Like, I didn't approve this. They came back, the universities, they double-checked her work, and they're like, yeah, this is crazy. So they confirmed her research results.
Oh my gosh.
The perspective is worth 80 IQ points. Imagine that.
Oh, so what advice do you give to someone about what they say to themselves
Mm. In which way?
about themselves, their self-talk, how important
Uh,
is their self-talk.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I don't know. It's I'll just put a few disclaimers, right? Like the anybody giving legal advice. I'm not a lawyer, right? So I'm not a psychologist. I didn't study Freud. I didn't study therapeutic techniques. I didn't study any of this. So just put a lot of salt. If you respect those kind of people, put a lot of salt on what I'm going to say. I have no training whatsoever. All I have is my story and my journey, and it's a sample of one, to put it in scientific terms, right? There's no broad sample. It's just one person with one story. And I'll say that, your thoughts, they turn into actions. And your actions turn into reactions by everybody around you. And those reactions turn into your thoughts, because now you're perceiving your environment. So there's this a different kind of loop. But there's this loop, this reinforcing loop, right? So if you think about it, and there's some famous psychologists and philosophers that talk about this, but if you think about controlling your environment, right, then really you want to start at the beginning. You want to start with controlling your thoughts. So because again, your thoughts will become your actions will become your perception by others. Perception trumps reality, and then their perception of you will turn into their reaction towards you, and then your perception of them will turn into your reaction to them. So it's like this terrible loop. So I would say, yeah, absolutely, 100% control your thoughts. That's a great place to start. And what's interesting is that many times behavior and thoughts are absolutely open to interpretation. So we think we know, but it just ain't so. And I had this, maybe one of my, I didn't really like him as a manager, but there was one fundamental point where I was like, oh my God, you just changed my life. And I came into his office, and I was angry, and I was explaining to him why this customer is doing all the wrong things, and all they're saying is garbage, and because they were attacking me, and they were saying I was doing everything wrong, and that's how I felt. But this manager says to me, he goes one at a time, right? 10 things, and he listens to me, and he writes each one on the board. And then he did a version of the rotary test, which he wasn't a Rotarian. I don't know if he ever heard of it, but I'm a Rotarian nowadays. So he did a version of the rotary test. But he just used the first test. So if anybody not familiar with rotary, is it true? Is it fair to all involved? Does it bring good? So he did a version of that. And he went one by one. It was like, well, is this true? Is this fair? And he goes, 1, 2, 3, goes down all my 10 things. And I'm like, holy cow. Yes, it is all true. It is all fair. And I now understand why they are justifiably angry. So, just by putting your thoughts through the rotary test can completely change your thoughts and your thinking. So, when it comes to that, yeah, absolutely. Incredibly important, because you could be wrong. You could be misperceiving your environment. And that could be leading you down a path, that loop that we talked about before, is completely messing with your relationships and your happiness. So 100%. I love that question.
And it was a follow-up question because of the brown eyes, blue eyes things. These kids were told that they were stupid, and they tested stupid. They were told they were brilliant, and they tested brilliant.
That's right. That's right. Yes, that's right. That's right.
So
she did tests in the days, and then after the whole experiment, and that's where the IQ jumped. That's right. That's right. I didn't actually mention that, but that's true. Yes, they actually performed worse. This is true. I skipped that part. When they were under the stupid eyes, right? Every day it was a different one. So under their kind of like, you're an idiot, they performed significantly slower, because she was testing like the speed to do certain tasks. So when they were oppressed, they were performing worse. So you have the same kid, 2 days apart, put under a different, let's say, psychology or self-talk and external talk, and completely change their performance, right? That's crazy. Like, that sounds like what? Like,
it's such powerful information. If you are listening to this and you're hearing this and you're saying to yourself, negative things and that I'm not good enough or that they don't like me or whatever it
Yeah.
is, guys, you've got to
Yes.
capture those thoughts immediately. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, put a different thought in there because those thoughts become your actions and other people's reactions and then your actions to their reactions. That's brilliant. Okay. Okay. This is so much fun.
I should say that I invented none of this. I'm really a curator of wisdom, and maybe a parrot of it, but a lot of all of this is other people's wisdom, and there's books and research and the whole social psychology discipline, and people have won Nobel Prizes for this stuff. So I'm just parroting other wisdom, but it's my wisdom since it affected me personally, and that's why I share it.
Okay, so you've helped a lot of people with startups,
Yeah,
businesses,
this
that
is
kind of
true.
stuff. Give us a little clue into what it is you do for people, and maybe what is one of the biggest mistakes that most people make who are doing a startup.
Mm, mm. So, okay, so a little bit of background. Sure, I started my first business at 8, but I sold my first company at 15. So that was my first, what we call an exit, right? Had my second exit when I was, I think it was 26 it was $80 million. That's a
Whoa!
wonderful story. Yeah, yeah.
Good job,
Um,
man.
and I was a huge part of that exit. Actually, the company was about to fail, and I was a reason why the company pivoted in a different direction. So that was a really interesting story. And then, it's really dangerous to be so successful earlier on because you think it's easy. And I had quite a few failures. Every single entrepreneur who has succeeded has failed a lot, at least half their time. And if it's only half the time, they're amazing, right? They're like incredible. But if they fail, if they say that they've only succeeded once, then they got lucky and they only tried once, because there's no such thing as not failing if you've tried many times. So it's worthwhile saying that failure is part of the process. Worst mistake, okay, I'll give two and you tell me which one you want. One is almost screwed up $1 million deal. And if it wasn't for my boss helping me adjust, I would have totally messed it up. The other mistake, unfortunately, I made and can't recover from is I've lost relationships through startup kind of motions. Obviously, the first one I avoided, but even if I wouldn't have avoided it, losing relationships, I think, is much more painful. And then losing $1 million, you can always make money back. But every single time that I talk to entrepreneurs, every single time, because I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and sometimes it gets emotional and personal. Every single entrepreneur that's been in it and doing it for enough time, they've lost relationships. So I've come to the conclusion that it's an unavoidable truth of the industry. And every single one of them blames themselves. Now, it's got to be true that it takes two to tango and it's not their fault. But it's interesting to me to see that they always have that mindset, as do I blame myself. So it's interesting that every single one has that mindset of introspective, like, what did I do wrong? And was it even worth it to lose these relationships? So I would say that's probably the number one pain that entrepreneurs have. It's the lost relationships that they messed up due to the crazy environment and processes that surround entrepreneurship.
I think the mind of an entrepreneur, and I can talk about them because I are one. I think that they understand that if it really is someone else's fault outside of themselves, that there's nothing they can do about it.
You can understand that, and I agree with you, but that doesn't diminish the pain of losing somebody that you appreciated, loved, sometimes like a father, right? For me, that was the case. So, yes, that is fair. Yes, if you ask them, well, would you have made that decision again? They might often say yes. They might say, oh, I would have tried 3 or 4 things before, and tried to avoid the situation. But at the end of the day, they can agree that it was the right thing, but they still will then you ask them the final question, like, was it worth it? That's where nobody answers me. That's where they're all, I don't know. So they can think that they made the right choices, the right decisions, that it was not their fault necessarily. But when you ask that next question, was it worth it? I don't know. That's the answer I always get.
Really, that's
So
fascinating.
It is fascinating. And, the only reason I asked that question is because I asked myself that question, but it was really interesting to see that everybody else has that same situation, that same environment, those same experiences, and then that same reaction to that question that I can't answer myself. So that was absolutely fascinating. So maybe this is today turning into a stark warning against entrepreneurship. So we should balance it out with the beauties of our entrepreneurship and values. But yeah, that was so interesting. That was very insightful when I kind of got to hear these stories from other entrepreneurs.
Well, okay, let's do turn that around. Um, can you imagine going and punching in at 8 a.m. and having someone tell you you can go to lunch at this time and then coming back at 5, leaving at 5 p.m. and having to ask, can I have time off to go to the doctor?
It's a difficult question because um, first of all, that's what I'm doing right now, right? I'm working for a
Oh,
company. Sure, I do a lot of other stuff. But yeah, I'm punching that card in. I've done this kind of work for the man, right? Or woman, whatever, twice, 3 times already, right?
uh-huh.
Many times it has been as part of a startup or smaller company. So Cellebrite got sold to the Japanese company. That was the $80 million. And then Valor got sold to Mentor Graphics. And then Mentor Graphics got sold to Siemens. So those 2 instances, I was an employee, in fact. And I worked for what ultimately became Siemens for 8 years. But then I've done multiple startups. Some succeeded, some failed, right? So I've done both. I've worked for a 250,000 employee company, right? See what Siemens, and then I've worked for, employee number 13, which I grew the company to over 100 people, most of which I hired. And I got to tell you that there is a beauty in working in a well-orchestrated team with A players in an environment that's funded. There is a beauty to the fact that the environment is funded and you can be well paid. And then there's a beauty in bootstrapping, but it's incredibly painful. So I think that depending on your personality, there are different stages of company maturity that would be a good fit for you. Would I say, oh, this is the best stage or time? No, absolutely not. It depends on personality. For me, I've discovered that I enjoy not startup, not bootstrapping. The times that I've done that have been excruciating for me personally. What I enjoy is the startups which are growth startups. So it's where you move from, it's where you get round, B or round A, and you start like accelerating like crazy, and you're trying to bring all the madness into order and keep everybody from losing their mind in the process. So it's that disorder to order process. That is where I enjoy myself the most. But yeah, I help a lot of people that are in that bootstrapping phase. And I've done it multiple times myself and raised money and done the whole thing.
Gosh. Okay. So again, kind of a completely different world. Your left side of your brain, your right side of your brain, for them to work together, you have to do things that are out of the norm, that challenge you, that's not homeostasis. Where you're
Yeah,
comfortable. So you have traveled over 50 countries.
this is right.
How,
This is
how
true.
has that impacted you?
So I think the first question is why. So it's a mix of 2 things. One is I traveled for work. So that means that Valor, Mentor, Siemens, ultimately, they sent me to a big, large part of that. Maybe half. But then that leaves you to many more than 25, 30 countries that we elected into. And my dad, when I was about 5 or 6, he finished building a sailboat from scratch. He did everything. And the boat burned down. Electrical issue. Yeah, it's just really bad. So his dream was to sail around the world, coastal sailing, right, as they call it, which means that you just stay close to the coast. You don't go into open sea as much as you can avoid it. And he built that boat with his own 2 hands. He was in the South African Navy, so he knew everything about boats. And the boat burned down, and he kept delaying that dream. And now he's dying from cancer, and he has diabetes and tumors, and it's a whole. So it got to the level where he delayed that dream to the level where he just couldn't do it anymore. He wasn't well enough to make his sailing around the world dream come true. And I think many of us have a story like that, where our parents kind of had that dream and they never. So both my wife and I, we are trying, sometimes you mimic your parents and try to do the things they did. Sometimes you try to do the exact opposite. And this was a case of the latter. And we have this philosophy that you live today. You live as if there's a 50 chance that you're going to die tomorrow, and a 50% chance that you might die in 40 years or 50 years or 60 years. So we try to think about our life planning as if either one of those things could happen, and we want to be prepared for both. And that's really what's, driven our travel. And when we were young and poor, which is, most of our life, we would get in a car, even when we had 3 kids, and we've slept in the car once or twice because for different reasons, and sometimes planning, sometimes we just couldn't pay the amount that the hotel wanted. But we've seen more of America than I would say most Americans, right? Because we just got in the car, and anytime we had time off, we would go on a road trip. So we've road tripped our ass through America. And when we have these discussions with people who are born and raised and lived their entire life in America, we're more knowledgeable and we've been to more places. So we've kind of lived that life. And that's just the stuff we've done in America. And then obviously, Europe and Asia, and anywhere from Bali to Hawaii to the Cayman Islands to everywhere. And it's really been because of that, like, we're not going to make this mistake that both our parents made.
Wow. And you're in Italy talking to me today.
This is true. Yeah, we're just outside. I don't know if they will consider themselves Italians. I don't know if you know this, but the Southern Italians don't necessarily consider themselves Italians. But yes, we're in Italy, and we're just next to a couple of volcanoes. So actually tomorrow, I was going to say later this week, tomorrow we're going to see basically the volcano eruptions. This like lets off steam slowly. So we're going to see the lava flowing and all that. So that should be quite a unique experience.
Okay, Artie, you have an opportunity right now to talk to whoever is fortunate enough to be listening to this, and they're sitting on a dream, just like your dad was, and they still have time to do something about it. What do you want to say to them?
I want to avoid the inspirational, BS, because I think, it's wonderful, it makes you feel good, but I think the problem is it's not practical, it doesn't help you get there. So yeah, I mean, inspirational stuff is great because it helps you feel like you need to take action, and that's great. Go read a self-help book. What I would say is build a plan. So identify where you are now, be totally honest with yourself, and then identify where you want to be, and then break it down into small steps on how to get from point A to point B. And, if you want to, what are the blockers, right? So is it just money? And once you understand those two, those limits, those boundaries, then you can kind of say, well, what are the innovative ideas to reach this? So for example, let's say you want to travel the world. Like, oh, I need $1 million to travel the world and not work. Well, do you have to not work? Is there a way that you could travel the world with work? Would you agree to be a consultant? Because some types of consultants travel the world. So you could be paid to travel the world. Okay, fine. Okay, you want to travel the world, you want to do something very unique. You don't want to work at the same time. You need to save up money. Okay, well, what does that look like? What does your saving plan look like? What do you want to travel the whole world, or is there something specific you want to go see? The Antarctica. You want to go to Tierra del Fuego, Rio Grande, right? Beautiful place, by the way. If that's your dream, how much money do you need? What's the number, right? What are the things that you can cut, save, invest, work a second shift? How long will that take you? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? So there is no problem that is too complex for most of us, that it cannot be broken into a set of small steps that are completely achievable, right? Just, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Right. So I would say, I'll leave the inspirational stuff to self-help books. I would say, build a plan, one step at a time, go get them.
I love it. The very practical. I'm incredibly logical and practical myself, and I love it because yeah, you have to do it. No one is going to ride in on a white horse and give you the $1 million
Nobody's
check of
coming.
the world. No,
Nobody is coming.
sorry, it's not happening. Okay, so one question that I ask everyone before I let them go is what inspires you? What books, movies, tapes, what inspires you?
If I had to pick my favorite movie, my two favorite movies that absolutely kind of I left and I was transformed, is a French movie called Amélie. And it's a story about chaos, about love, about giving, that for me was absolutely transformative. I'm assuming many Americans have not seen the movie, so I would absolutely recommend to see it. I can't remember if they actually have a dub, so you might have to be watching it in French with subtitles. So be warned. And the reason that I love that movie is because it really, to a certain degree, portrays the beauty of chaos. And for me, that's what life has been about. It's being able to see the beauty through the chaos, because we're living in the chaos every day. And what I'm starting to understand, and even though it's been told to me many times, these times today with the kids, the worst times are the best of times. They were the worst of times, they were the best of times, right? That's a famous quote. I can't remember if that was Moby Dick or I can't remember anymore, but it truly is true. The problem is that we only see it with the gift of perspective, with distance. But I think the magic is understanding that the worst of times are the best of times. And if that we can have that immediate perspective and understand that as we're living through it, it allows us to decide not to frown, but to smile and say, I'm gonna have fun with this right now, even though it's a mess, and I'm gonna enjoy it. And this too shall pass, but this will be a memory for a lifetime. And in retrospect, many of our absolute worst experiences that we've had have been our best memories. So I think that would be my small little gift, to say that your worst times are your best times. And if you can figure that out sooner, you'll have a happier life.
I love it. And the last question, because you're on Think Your Way to an Epic Life, is what tips or tricks do you have for our folks to think their way to even half of the life that you're leading?
Well, that's very kind of you. I don't know that it's true, but we're definitely happy with the direction we're going down. A few, let's say, I have a few life hacks. I'm going to write an article about it, but I wrote this kind of, rough article in preparation for our meeting, and I'll give you one of them.
Okay.
And the one that I'd like to give you as a final wrap up, as advice, is that there is no number, right? So when I was in University of Chicago, I kind of portray this as joining the enemy for for my MBA. I used to ask this simple question: what is the number, right? Dollars, financial number, in which you will be happy? And most people said there is no number. So they're like, oh, so I pushed them and I prodded them and I was like, okay, well, what if you made $200,000 a year? That's a lot of money. So remember, the average income I think this is per family in the United States, is $67,000. This is significantly over the average. I'm like, no, if I had this, then I could do this and this, but I'd still need this. So, okay, what if it's $400,000 a year in income? And still they couldn't imagine themselves being happy. So my point is, there is no number. There is no number at which you will arrive that you'll have enough money and you'll be happy. There's no number. Now, if it is true that there is no number, what does that mean? That means that any number is the number, that all the numbers are the number. So for me, and this is, this goes back to long time ago when I was studying Descartes, and I was like, oh, it's who's the happiest man? He's naked, right? And then you go back to, well, of course, that's a fable that has a point. The point is that they make it extreme. And they're trying to say, oh, the extreme version of this is that, oh, you don't really need anything to be happy. The person that is the most happiest person in the world is naked, has nothing, right? But the more digestible point here is that any number is the right number, and whatever you're making, whatever you have, you can be happy at that number. And for me, I think, I don't know if this is true, I guess we'll figure it out. The key to being happy at any number is just being appreciative of what you have. So, you know, the days that we were, you know, sleeping in the car, or the days that I was, I wish I knew this, from the days when I was out in the street and, you know, didn't have anywhere to sleep. You know, anywhere you are, whatever that number is, you can be happy by being appreciative of the things that you do, in fact, have. Your health, your friends, your family, whatever it is, right? There's a lot to be grateful for. And the way to be happy at any number is through appreciation, gratefulness, and giving.
Appreciation, gratefulness, and giving. And guys, I can back that up. Literally, it might sound like a ridiculous thing, but I have 5 different groups of people that I text with every 5 days a week. Now, I give myself weekends off, but 5 days a week, and write down my affirmations and 5 things that I'm grateful for that happened in the past 24 hours. That's training my brain to look for what's right. And guys, when you think about what you're grateful for, you get more of it. Ari, I cannot thank you enough. I have enjoyed our time together immensely. You are an incredible person.
did
You're a
I.
great dad. I don't care what anybody has to say about your mouth. You're you're a great dad. And thank you so much for being with us.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for having me, Cara.